Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Van Scoik. I am super thrilled to be with you this morning. Thank you for starting your day here. And thank you to everybody who is joining us once again this week. Since 2010, Lessons in Leadership series has been a unique way for the LGH network to come together for continued development and relationship building. This is a mashup between a book club, leadership training, and virtual networking. This series gives us a chance to engage or re-engage around a timely issue by drawing on LGH's human-centered leadership approach, insights from a dynamic author, and the diverse perspectives of those in the room, which would be everyone here. This year, with the many challenges facing our communities, each of our facilitators use the concepts and themes of Brene Brown's newest book, Strong Ground, as a catalyst for conversation. So there will be plenty of sharing and learning. So we're just going to cover some virtual norms. As you know, Lessons in Leadership is designed to be interactive, and as always, we have facilitated breakout rooms later, and we hope that you'll have your cameras on and fully participate as much as you are able. You are also welcome to rename yourself with any info that you'd like to share, and introduce yourself in the chat. You'll be muted throughout the presentation this morning, but will be unmuted in the breakout rooms. And if you find that you're having any technical difficulties, please send a chat to to Larissa. Send a chat to Larissa. uh, Before we continue, we want to thank our series sponsors, CIL and CREC. Today's session and this series would not be possible without these folks. Now, when I introduced myself, I neglected to mention that I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for CIL. So I'm happy to be here today to MC. CIL is a Hartford-based 501c3 nonprofit real estate developer, and we are really focused on developing community-based housing for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, acquired brain injury, and other populations as well. And we also, in Connecticut, run a program called Access Solutions, which helps folks who may have become disabled do home modifications to their homes. And we actually have we're doing a fundraiser for that event on March 31st. So if you are around and you want to have a red carpet night, tickets are available on our website at cil.org. Additionally, Capital Region Education Council is a regional educational service center serving more than 30 districts in Greater Hartford, providing a wide range of high-quality programs and services that support students, educators, and families. CREC's work includes professional development for educators, operation of tuition-free interdistrict magnet schools, customized educational programming, and collaborative services that advance equity, excellence, and opportunity for learners of all ages. To learn more about CIL or CREC, please visit their websites that we are dropping in the chat. Again, thank you to our friends at CIL and CREC for your investment and long-term support of LGH. We're happy to do it. And we would also like to thank our visionary sponsors as seen on the screen. These partners have invested in our year-long alumni engagement events, including Lessons in Leadership. And if there's any individuals from these sponsoring organizations present this morning, please give a wave and we will recognize you. If your organization or company is interested in becoming an LGH sponsor, please email us so that we can design a sponsorship package that is meaningful to your company. And if you are not already connected with us on social media, please make sure to hit us up. Uh, this is a great way to support LGH and learn about the programs that we offer and help others learn about them too. So we hope you'll connect with us. And today is session 3 of 4. We hope you can join us for the final session of the series next week. Either way, you will receive the recording afterwards with our follow-up communication, and we are super grateful to all of the fabulous and dynamic facilitators that we've had. It is my pleasure today to introduce today's presenter, Joelle Murchison. Joelle A. Murchison is the CEO and founder of EMG, an inclusion organizational culture and leadership consulting practice. Murchison is a well-respected human capital leader and practitioner, having worked in the space for nearly 3 decades. She served as the Chief Diversity Officer at both Travelers Insurance and the University of Connecticut before launching EMG. Additionally, Joelle serves as the Executive Director of Lawyers Collaborative for Diversity. She is a trustee and chair of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee at the Corporation of Brown University, the university's decision-making body. She is also a life member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, an international public service organization, and currently serves as the president of the Hartford Alumni Chapter. Additionally, Murchison is an elected member of the East Hartford Board of Education and most recently was appointed to the Women's Business Development Council's Hartford Regional Advisory Council. Joelle is the recipient of numerous awards, including most recently the Polaris Award in Leadership from Leadership Greater Hartford, and is a graduate of the fall 2023 cohort of the Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women Black in Business program. She is a sought-after speaker and contributor, including recent appearances on News 12 New York and Fox 61's The Real Story, as well as publication and mentions in the Hartford Courant, Medium, Monster.com, Authority Magazine, among others. Joelle is also a featured author in a new book, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Veterinary Medicine, released in 2025. Joelle, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. Thank you, Sam, for such a wonderful introduction. You always, when you provide a bio, cringe as you listen to folks read it. So I thank you, though, for your grace in sharing what has brought me to this day. I'm so grateful to Leadership Greater Hartford for this opportunity to think a little bit about this topic, particularly in this time. We are facing significant change and transformation in our society. And I think for leaders to come together and have a moment to think about what strong ground means, in both literally and figuratively, is so important. So we can go to the next slide and get started. So interestingly enough, I found this image, which is very, very real for me because the only pets that we have are goldfish. And over the last 2 years of having goldfish, I discovered that goldfish are actually much different than I ever imagined. I've taken goldfish for granted for years because I never realized that goldfish are actually social beings. The goldfish that are behind me, unfortunately, that you all can't see, have grown from the size of a half of my finger to 2 or 3 times my finger, which is amazing in and of itself. But I also had no idea that goldfish actually do jump, just like the goldfish in this picture. And the reason that the people at PetSmart convinced me to buy some ridiculously sized gallon tank was because they knew that those little goldfish would grow much bigger and would need a lot of space. So often while I'm working during the day, I hear the jumping. I hear little plops in the background because they actually do exactly what you see pictured. And I think that it allowed me to realize that a lot of things that exist in our society are not what they seem. We think that goldfish are small and that they're not going to change and grow and move. But in reality, it is a synonym for what we see in our society every day. They actually grow, they get bigger. And even though they don't make a lot of noise, at least we don't think they make noise, they actually do move and jump and cause us to realize that change does indeed happen. Go to the next slide. This is my absolute favorite quote. I have it on the side of my desk. And it's always a good reminder as we are in a place of change that while we know that change is uncomfortable, and that as good leaders, we have to be willing and ready to face change, that all the things that we often face may not be able to be changed, but you cannot change anything until you face it. James Baldwin says it 10,000 times better. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. It would be easy for us in the face of change to sort of cover our heads and not deal with it. But the reality is that we do, in fact, have to deal with it because we know that change is inevitable. We can go to the next slide. I love LGH for multiple reasons, but one of them is the fact that when I think about my grounding in understanding around teams, it occurred actually in the midst of the Quest program. And these pillars that still resonate today are so important in thinking about how we then translate our leadership into new dynamics as we move through time. Psychological safety, the notion that team members must build trust and have to feel safe in order to engage, express themselves, and actually be their best. I always remember the concept of storming, forming, and norming. And it causes me not to be afraid when I think about the notion of coming together with new colleagues in a team. So that psychological safety is a critical component of building an effective team. Our shared purpose. Why are we here? Our values are what drive us. Our values are what keep us, even in the face of uncertainty. And then finally, clear expectations. What is it that we are desiring as an outcome? What do we expect to happen? And who is accountable for all of the different components? These three pillars really make up an incredible foundation for moving forward in terms of leading and guiding a team, particularly through uncertainty, which seems to be the order of the day. So let's move ahead and talk about Brene Brown's book. You can go to the next slide. What is strong ground? So initially, when I looked at the title of the book, I started to think about it for myself. What grounds me? What are the things that allow me to stand firm? And it's very similar with what Brene is saying, right? Your own footing. What are those values that hold you up in times of challenge? I think about my family. I think about the values that my mother has instilled in me about giving back. I think about never giving up, something that was always instilled in me by my father, that life is not fair, but it's up to you what you do with it. So the contribution, what you give, even in the face of challenge. Very, very critical. What is your strong ground? What holds you up in times of challenge? And then your connection to others who are grounded, because we are not an island. One of the things I've learned really, really intentionally over the last 6 years as a consultant, particularly during the pandemic, sitting in this corner of my living room that I'm sitting in today, feeling very lonely. As someone who is a people person and draws my energy from people, how do I ensure that I am connected to others who are grounded similarly, who have the same attitude and values around what we do when things get tough? or how you show up to ensure that your team can be successful. Well, I made sure that I was connected to folks via Zoom, that I was connected to folks even at the time during the pandemic where we weren't supposed to be around. I very intentionally remember meeting a colleague in the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts in Rocky Hill and sitting with our cars parked so that our driver's sides were near one another so we could at least engage. That grounding and finding community who shares your values is so critical. We don't know everything, and we also need our colleagues and others to help us make the right decisions sometimes when we need assistance and don't always have the right answers. And so those two things are absolutely mission critical. Coupled with the three pillars from Leadership Greater Hartford that we just talked about, really are a recipe for success in leadership in uncertain times. So let's talk about one of the components. There's several different things that Brene Brown raises in the context of the chapters that we're focused on today. And today's segment, we are focusing on the notion of paradox, creativity, and grounded confidence. So we'll start with the last one, grounded confidence. Now, I love this because one of the things that I admire about leaders is their ability to be bold, their ability to step out and step forward, perhaps when it's not popular. And I love the fact that she talks about grounded confidence as confidence that's not arrogant. Too often, we assume that leaders who demonstrate confidence are somehow arrogant. I believe that they're actually two very different things. Personally, this really hit home with me because there is this notion of the angry Black woman. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, but it's this notion that when African American woman expresses themselves very passionately, that it's considered that they are angry. And I've had to wrestle with that many times throughout my own leadership journey because, in fact, it's passion, it's bold confidence, and not arrogance at all. Because, as I said earlier, as leaders, one of the things we need to understand at the outset is we don't know everything. And it's critically important for us to understand that we need others. But that bold confidence is what drives us. And it's derived from the passion that sits within us from our values oftentimes. So I love that Brene brought this out. And I see even from the chat that other women experience that as well. It is unfortunately ascribed to many women in our society. So I think that Brene talks about it as really understanding the core of who we are, our strengths, and our capabilities as to how we apply it in working with others. It also very closely mirrors a definition, as you heard in my bio. There's a book that I recently wrote a chapter in, and the chapter is about emotional intelligence. And Brene actually references Daniel Goleman several times in Stand Strong Ground, because the notion of emotional intelligence is really critical here. It's about understanding who you are, your emotions, your triggers, and understanding those of others. And so I think it's important, particularly when we talk about grounded confidence, really this notion of the deep curiosity about yourself, right? We always are learning about ourselves, and in particular, how we might be triggered or empowered and inspired by others. But it requires you to know something about those around you and how they also move in the world. So, the notion of grounded confidence, I think, is so important. The grounding, the understanding, the deep knowledge, not only about yourself, but about others, and being able to demonstrate your confidence and courage, I would argue, to move forward in the face of challenge. This one, I think, actually could probably be dug into on its own as we think about this book. There's so many different elements in the book that, for me at least, really connect to other concepts in leadership. But this one really, I think, can be dug into. So the next slide, I want to dig into it just a little bit in the thought about self-awareness. Now, I think too often we discount the need, particularly as leaders, to be self-aware. And we have to be self-aware while at the same time understanding others. We also have to understand our own limitations and those things that are our strengths, right? So just digging into the grounded confidence a little bit. I love this quote. Again, I think Brene has had some conversations with Daniel Goleman about emotional intelligence, and these really do connect. She talks about, or he talks about here in this quote, that our beliefs about our own abilities have an effect on those abilities. Now, I might throw another thing in here, but this is for another workshop at another time. When we talk about our belief about our abilities, it makes me think about something we call imposter syndrome, right? So, working on and understanding our own abilities, how well we can perform, and the fact that we can change and grow. Sometimes when we think about what we know, we think that it's a fixed element, and it's not. Our abilities can change literally with every opportunity that we take to learn and grow. You all will leave this session having learned something that I guarantee you will impact the way that you think about your capability to show up. Daniel goes further to say in this quote that when you have a strong sense of self efficacy, when you know that you can be successful, that you also have the ability to bounce back when things don't go the way that you would like them to be. And the reality is, we all have got to draw on that particular strength in this time where things are so uncertain. And we look often, I know sometimes if I allow myself to devolve into this thought process, there are so many things to tackle in this world, right? Can we realistically tackle them all? Certainly not by ourselves. Can we tackle them all in 24 hours, in 365 days? Probably not. But the reality is that we can, in fact, bounce back from challenges and from failures. He says in this quote, and we'll talk about failure in just a moment, and how we approach things, to think about how we can handle them. And in this sense, who might we reach out to in our own communities to help us to move forward, to create change, rather than worrying about what can go wrong? It is absolutely a glass half full rather than a glass half empty perspective. When we think about strength within our own self efficacy, that allows us to realize that in the face of challenge, we still have the ability to move forward and be successful if, in fact, we think about how we're going to move forward rather than worrying about what could go wrong. That's a huge transformation instead of the woe is me thinking that we hear quite a bit on social media. I'm not going to go too far into that. Let's go to the next concept around the above and below the line practice. So, again, this I'm sure is extremely small on your screen, but I wanted to make sure that you see the image. If you have the book, or even if you don't, if you download the audiobook, there is a PDF that you can download that the author makes available, and this image is there. So if you want to access it, you certainly can. Um, Thinking about the concept of how we approach things, right, is another challenge. So, our self awareness, our own self efficacy, and how we behave in situations. I don't know about you all, but I certainly have been wrestling with myself more recently. I don't know if it's the turning 50 and now I'm a few years into it, but realizing how I can only control my own responses, my own reactions to other people's behavior. I can't control their behavior. And so we have to think about what it is that triggers us to behave one way or another. And I love it, this above the line or below the line practice. It requires us to go inside, think about what those things are that trigger us, and how we behave, whether above the line or below the line, in response. There are some great examples in the book, if you have it, or if you listen to the audio in this chapter about above and below the line. Above the line is not about perfection, right? There's nothing, and actually, to be a little transparent, my therapist said that to me a few months ago. And I have to say that I initially was a little bit like, what are you talking about? I don't do anything that's not good, that's not right. I am absolutely anal, particularly about certain things in the way I show up. But being above the line is really about remembering our grounding, that grounded confidence, that curiosity that we have about how we respond to things and how others respond and react to them. So, using language that allows us to speak, I would say, more positively rather than perfectly as you approach a situation. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be perfect, because sometimes our emotions are at work in these situations. But thinking about how we shape our language so that it is encouraging, inspiring, and actually serves as a way to allow for individuals to create, allows for them to be challenged or to be coached. So, for example, using language that is above the line, even when you're being challenged, is that's a really interesting thought. Can you help me to better understand what got you to that point? Right? When inside you might be thinking, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in life. But how do you encourage your team member to connect with their own grounded confidence and help you better understand what it is that they are trying to get across, right? Our below the line practice is where, if we're honest, our initial thought processes go, right? It's the armored state, that protective, when we are at times defensive. What she describes it as where we're leading from fear or a need to be right. And sadly, some of us in our leadership roles are often positioned to defend. Now, there's good defense, right? When we are standing up for things that are right, for sure. But oftentimes, our defense is coming from something that we hold dear, that we feel is being challenged, or perhaps an idea that, quite frankly, we never thought about, but that someone else is advancing as the best idea, maybe not our idea. So, our challenge in digging into this principle is how we shape, I think, our language, what comes out, right? When we are good at being able to filter our thoughts and how it comes out is, I think, the difference between really, really strong leadership and those who might have some opportunities. We're going to go on to the next, because I think, as we talked about this being a wonderful opportunity to learn, but also practice, and also engage with one another and network. So I want to get to the next one so that when you get into your breakout rooms, you have sufficient time to engage with one another. So here's the piece about perfection. This is where I feel like Brene Brown was sitting on my shoulder in my therapy session a few months ago to really examine the notion of perfection, and thinking that we and others need to be perfect. In reality, we really want to think about mastery. How do we engage in continuous learning? And she talks about it as the curved line of learning. But how do we make sure that we are constantly learning so that we get better, not necessarily perfect? Right? Because if we're really intentional about engaging with folks, we're learning at every point in time. And so she talks here about unlearning old habits and changing our language to think about when and we talk often about making good mistakes. I know that some of you may know that Google, at least, has an opportunity where people are supposed to work and develop moonshots. And they give them stickers or some type of representation that shows how many times they've tried, not necessarily how many times they were successful. So, reframing that notion about failure, right? I've tried and it didn't work, to making it a near win or a reinvention. I almost got it done. I've reinvented. There's an opportunity for me to try again. And good leaders make space for imperfection. You make it such that your team feels like they can go out and be innovative and creative. And they might even be able to make a mistake because the learning comes from the process, right? And then one other point that was shared is that presence is built through character, not just technical skill. So, how you develop and grow as a person, as a leader, not just being technical. Now, it's funny because I think a lot of places we reward people for their technical skill. And then we discover that they're not great leaders after all, because technical skill is not what drives leadership. It means that you're really good at something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have all of the qualities necessary to drive your team forward. Let's move to the next one. So, this notion of paradox of play and grit. Now, what I like to refer to this is work hard and play hard. That's how we think about it in the context of our reality. But what Brene talks about is this notion of um, the fact that if we do engage in grit, and we hear a lot about that now, people have been talking about that in the context of performance evaluations. Does the individual demonstrate grit? But a constant hard driving grit without play leads to burnout and stagnation. Now, how many times have we seen that played out in our organizations, particularly as we think about some of our volunteer roles? Some folks, even in their third act, when they've retired, they get so deeply invested, involved in their volunteer roles that they're working harder than they were working when they were in the workplace, right? So, how do we make sure that we find a balance between the notion of grit, really working hard, leaning in, without making sure that we burn out? Creativity and innovation, and I love this, requires surrender. It requires that we take some time to let go and breathe. It is critical, and I've this is another one of my after 50 learnings, that sometimes it's okay to just be still. And you'd be amazed sometimes about the ideas and the creativity that can come from you being still. Because when we are in a constant state of motion, we're only able to react to what is the now. Taking a moment to play, to rest, enables, as she says, creativity to breathe. And it enables us to allow our minds to have some space to think of what might be next and what may allow us to move forward without burning out. So let's move to the next one. Emotional awareness and regulation. So I feel like this book, while it talks about some really concrete tenets around therapy, also can be a really, really good therapy session. Leadership and perhaps what you need to do to emotionally regulate. Now, to mention emotional intelligence just for a moment, um, we think about all of these different components for ourselves and for others, but we also have to navigate how we can regulate. So she talks about these four different B's: biology, biography, behavior, and backstory. In the work that I've done throughout my career in the area of inclusion and equity, we spend a lot of time thinking about the notion of understanding biography beyond biology, right? Biology allows us to look at people, and sometimes we don't know everything about people just by looking at them. But the biography is what allows us to understand ourselves and people more deeply. Who are we? What shaped us? What actually shaped our values? How did we learn those things that we believe? And how did we learn the biases that we may be holding? Our behavior comes out of our biography. What we've learned oftentimes shaped how we respond, the emotions and behaviors, the triggers that we have. And so it's important for us to stop and examine what brought me here. Why do I feel this way? And so, what is the backstory? How did my biology, my biography, my behavior bring me to this point? This is a very critical component of how you work with teams and understand the individuals that are part of any community that you are engaging in. We'll go to the next. So this one is a little bit sort of, I thought, a little bit tangential, but very critical to where we sit right now as we navigate the place of AI. There are many, many individuals who question, and hopefully you all will wrestle with this a bit in the breakout sessions, but who question where the humanity is in the notion of AI. And so there's one component where it's wonderful to be able to type some words in and get an immediate answer, right? And eventually, even my sister uses it quite a bit in her business and has shaped her AI to speak in her voice. I'm still not sure how she's done that, but I guess there's you can train AI. I'm not as deeply involved, so please don't hate on me on that. But it is critically important to think about the role that AI plays in how we understand the humanness of the individuals on our team. And so, what she talks about in this segment really is the notion of layering AI into a healthy culture. Where does it fit in? It shouldn't, or it doesn't take over everything, the actions, the thoughts, and the processes of humans, but it must be layered into the culture. And that there is still a place for people and strategy that has to be recalibrated as we embrace AI. We cannot just allow AI sort of to take off and lead. We are still people leaders. And then the last piece before we move into the breakouts is around relational leadership. And that's on the next slide. So one of the things that Brene Brown says is strong ground is the athletic stance that provides stability in a maelstrom of uncertainty. And when I think about the athletic component of that, I'm reminded of when we talk about the importance of our muscle, building our muscle. So, both literally, our physical muscles, and figuratively. It gives us something to stand on. My trainer talks about all the time. If you keep your muscle, you won't lose. If you continue to work on your muscle, you won't lose it. The same holds true for our brains. They too are muscles that we have to continue to work on, that we have to continue to provide challenge to. And so the notion of strong ground encourages us to use our brains, our cognitive self, to be able to stand strong in the face of uncertainty. Amidst all of the digital noise, amidst all of the different facts and perspectives that we're hearing, the encouragement is to maintain our strength of our muscle, of our capability to think, to be inquisitive, to ask questions, to engage, and to learn. It is the foundation that will allow us, particularly if we operate in community and with one another, to build a foundation of trust and to build collaboration and connections that will hold you up in the midst of, as she talks about, the storm. So, with that, we'll think about a couple of questions as we move into the breakouts. The core question from this particular segment of the book is how do we grow, adapt, and lead when there are no simple answers? So, again, thinking about the strength of your muscles in your brain. The brain is a very significant muscle. How do we continue to stretch it and grow it and keep it fertile enough to allow us to navigate and innovate and to continue to grow and adapt through these changing times? So, in your breakout groups, we want you to explore, and I absolutely um, want you to think about the broader concepts of these questions. There were so many from these 4 chapters that it was impossible to try to cull it down. So, to the extent that it makes sense for you to kind of navigate in and out or what have you, please feel free to do so. When have you led from below the line? So, think about what caused you to get there. What was the trigger? And how might you turn that around? How would reframing a recent failure, quote unquote, as a trial, as a test, change your next steps? How do you change and reframe something that feels negative to something that feels positive? And in this AI driven world, which uniquely human skills are you intentionally using and developing? How, in the face of AI, have we, just like sometimes when we lose the use of a sense, perhaps maybe we can't see, our other senses become heightened. So while AI might answer some of the needs that we have, what are the other skills that we have that are showing up differently, as we may rely on technology? So hopefully those at least set the stage for the questions and discussions that you have in the breakout rooms. And I'm going to allow Larissa to give you some instruction, or is it Sam? One of you, someone is going to give some instruction about the breakout rooms at this point. Someone,
Yeah, yes, indeed.
Larissa.
Folks, our breakout rooms are going to open momentarily. We'll have about 25 minutes for conversation, so facilitators will send some updates, but enjoy your conversations. Sam, are you up for joining a room?
Do I just join any room or?
I'll put you in a room
Okay.
if you're up for it. You good?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Hang on one second. Hi, Maggie.
Welcome back. The thing I love about Zoom is that when it's time to come back, you have no choice but to come back. But we are so glad, because it sounds like the conversation was very rich and fruitful because no one came back early. So I'm really excited about that, and hope you all have some wonderful things you'd like to share. So we are going to take about the next 10 minutes or so to hear from some of you in your groups. I think you have been given the expectation that we would be asking. So hopefully there are some of you who are chomping at the bit to share out what you heard or what you shared in your groups. So you can feel free to raise a hand, type a comment in the chat if you are being a little more shy. Who wants to be first? I'm sure we can come up with some wonderful LGH
John, I
gifts.
see your
John,
hand
Oh,
raised.
yeah,
Go
go
right
John,
for it,
all
on.
John.
right. All right.
Sorry, I was looking for the emoji to throw up the hand. I think one of the more interesting parts that we came up with in our group that we shared, a few of us, was the difference between standing your stronger ground uh, in professional versus personal settings, that certain things are at stake in certain ones. Like me, for instance, I've gotten to this point where my family is like the most important thing to me. So that's what I'm worried about. Everything else, the needle could be moving like that, and I'm not going to react as much as I used to. It depends what decade, what chapter you are in life. But that the way that we approach the material in the book definitely changes or adjusts based on the environment that you're in, which I mean sounds like common sense, but especially between professional and family, because it all depends on what's on the line.
Mm, mm. That's a great point. That's a great point. Thanks, John. I see Maggie.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Maggie La Lima, HR professional and LGH board member. Excited to be here. Thanks for letting me share a point here. The thing I was reflecting on in our conversation was the gritty facts concept. Um, AI is throwing us all for a loop in the HR world because when you bring in artificial intelligence to any environment, especially a corporate environment where there's a lot of efficiency to be had, that means job loss. And that is a really challenging fact. And so we're leading through this time right now that has moved at the speed of light over the past 2 years. And we haven't gotten through it yet. And so we're leading through this balance of gritty facts and gritty faith, trying to recognize it will be okay at the end of this kind of AI tunnel, but it's going to be a long road, and people are frustrated and burnt out, and it's a lot of unknowns. So that's the balance between those two in the AI space right now.
Yeah, that component, particularly as was raised in the reading, the human versus tech, right? How do we navigate through that? And even for people who might need to reinvent, right, in order to stay relevant, if you will, within the workplace. Really, really salient points. Absolutely. Other groups. I see, is it Janae?
Yes, you said it right.
Oh,
I'm
good.
I'm Janae Hendricks. I'm the Assistant Director of Operations for Craig Head Start. And we just talked about the above line leadership. So leading from curiosity, trying to tuck away some of that perfectionism and focusing on the outcome, and that despite, sometimes trial and error, the end result is usually positive if we can all get together and learn something new. We also touched upon AI and how it's a beautiful thing because it can enhance your thoughts, and help to clean up some of the things that you're putting to paper, but how it can be disruptive for younger learners who are using it instead of going into deeper thoughts and trying to put their own thoughts to paper. We also talked about uncertainty with this political climate. So for me, being a Head Start program, federally funded, the importance of, still showing up, but using open communication because, our families, our staff could have been impacted. We were blessed to still receive our funding, but still showing up and doing the work in times of uncertainty.
hmm Yeah, so many different nuggets there, and particularly raising the generational component as well in terms of the implications for AI, certainly for employers, as well as leaders as you navigate multiple generations in the workforce. I feel like we were here once before as well, talking about, now we have, because again, there are folks who are unable to retire or folks who have left earlier than planned. So gaps in knowledge in the workforce that folks might assume that AI can replace, but there is that human piece, right, that we still need to ensure is there. And then just really kind of showing up and leading every day takes some courage. So it's a really important point that was shared for sure. Thanks, Janae, and that whole group. Is there another group that wants to share with us this morning? Or your own personal thought, a burning comment?
Hi, Joelle.
Hi, good morning.
And I will report out from my group. And I think what I would like to just share, a couple of things that we've already heard. And our group, we did also touch upon in the conversation around AI, this fact that, keep in mind that, AI will never be able to replace personal connection. It won't be able to sit and listen. There won't be empathy through AI. So that there are still those aspects of interaction, of learning and communication that AI will never be able to replace. So how are we going to both benefit from the positive contribution, but keep in mind where we have to also focus and refine those elements of humanity. How do we keep that in place?
Absolutely.
They also had spoken really eloquently just around that conversation of leading from below the line as opposed to leading from above the line. And we were able to hear of a situation of leading below the line that led to someone just, I could only last for a year and then I left. So there's a drain of talent. There's that risk that you lose people that really could be contributing to the organization's success. And then another one on the opposite, where there was a leader who was leading from above the line. And in that situation, the individual felt supportive, felt that their confidence was boosted, and that they were assisted to be able to grow personally and professionally and to move on through the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you
Yes.
to my team. They made my job easy.
Thanks to that group, some really great nuggets as well, particularly that we can't leave humans behind, right? As much as AI may be a wonderful invention, if you will, it is an addition, should not be replacing the value of human interaction and human contribution to our organizations and our teams, for sure. I know there were 7 groups. Is there one other group perhaps that may want to share out that we didn't hear from, or anything that we did not hear that anyone wants to add? All right. Well, I am confident that we've done some good work. And so, as I think is always important, is to allow for some time for the concepts to marinate. I suspect that you'll be thinking about this conversation certainly throughout the rest of the day today, and hopefully it will propel you to sign up if you have not already for next week's session. I know I jumped ahead, but it was a shameless plug that I felt like I had to throw in right then and there. So in closing, as I was saying to Larissa earlier, I feel like I tried to pull Brené's words, which might feel a little esoteric in the moment, but just in terms of trying to give you all some closing nuggets to leave with. What we talked about, and it sounds like you all did as well in your groups, is really the ability to stay grounded in both high stress moments, but also in this time of uncertainty. It would be easy for us to default into that sort of protective, defensive, fearful space, which she defined as armored leadership, but just the encouragement to stay grounded. You know how sometimes people say, people ask you how you're doing and you say, I'm hanging in there. My pastor always says, just don't let go. And so I'm reminded of that in this moment, right? Stay grounded, draw on those things that will allow you to not lose sight of your values in the midst of this uncertainty. Presence and leadership effectiveness are built through preparation and character, not just technical skill. I wish sometimes when I think about organizations that I've worked in that we really thought about that when we were promoting folks into roles to lead, that it was not simply based upon their technical capability, but on the ability to have self-awareness and self-efficacy and have mastered things like emotional intelligence to be able to drive their teams. So recognizing that as we are assessing and evaluating folks, that those are very valuable skills, not just their technical capability. Sometimes when we talk about the notion of play, we ascribe it to those who are fortunate enough to be able to do so. And we sometimes think about it in the context of being able to have things or to go places. I would argue that we can find ways to play and find ways to demonstrate and allow creativity to breathe that do not always cost something, right? It is an opportunity that we give ourselves each day, even just to walk outside, to take a moment to breathe and think about something, perhaps to turn off your phone for a moment so that you can allow your mind to run and think of new things. We always have to be recalibrating as we navigate our strategies. We all as leaders set our plans, right? 1-year plan, 3 to 5 year plans. Nothing that has happened over the last 12 months was on anybody's bingo card. So we have to constantly be in leadership, recalibrating and ensuring that we can continue to accomplish what we've set out to do, even in different scenarios. And then finally, just thinking about, and I think it was Anne that shared this from the group, the notion that empathy is always going to be something that we as humans bring to the table, perspective taking and collaboration. Those are really the pillars of what it means to maintain strong ground. And so hopefully all of those messages today resonate with all of you at some point. I do hope that you will have conversations with others, share some of the points so that we can continue to inspire and encourage one another. These are some challenging days, and I think we all would benefit from something that adds a little bit to our cup to fill us up. So I want to thank Leadership Greater Hartford for the opportunity to be in community with all of you this morning. And I do hope that you all have a wonderful day. I'm going to turn it back over to Larissa, I think, for some closing comments, or maybe it's Sam as the host for closing comments. But just thank you all so much for your engagement, both here live and in your breakout groups and in the chat. Thank you so much. It's been a gift.
Thank you, Joelle. Yay. That was a wonderful session, and thank you for guiding this way of thinking about impactful leadership. Thank you to everybody who attended, for being present this morning, for sharing, and we really hope that you continue these conversations long beyond the Zoom room. And please join me again in thanking our fabulous breakout room sponsors, or facilitators, sorry. And one last thank you to CIL and CREC for sponsoring Lessons in Leadership. You are such wonderful partners. Visionary, thank you to our visionary sponsors. We couldn't do this transformative work without the support of all of you. And next session, we are super excited to close out our final session with Mariana Serrano. Mari will build on what we discussed today and focus on accountability, connection, and wisdom as we dive through the final chapters, 17 through 22 of the book. And LGH has a very full spring ahead, and we hope you can join us for some of that programming. Quest 2026, our largest class ever, launches with a full-day workshop tomorrow. And as we had a wait list for this year, we are already filling spots for 2027. That's really exciting. The spring and fall executive orientation programs are filling quickly, and we are currently offering or working with over 15 organizations offering retreats, workshops, and leadership academies through our LGH consulting and training. If you or somebody you know would be interested in learning more, please reach out to any of the LGH staff members or visit our website. And we are super looking forward to Polaris 2026 and hope to see you there. The award winners are going to be announced very soon. And just a thank you again for joining us this morning. As a reminder, you will be receiving a survey from today's session. Please fill that out. We so value your feedback and work to incorporate your ideas into our sessions. And thank you again for actively participating in today's program. I sure have been inspired, and I hope you have been too. Remember, strong teams are built by grounded people. So ground yourself, be brave enough to be vulnerable, stay connected, and do the work. And we'll see you guys next week.